Welcome back into the show. I know there's a lot of hype about week one of the NFL weekend, but we are in week three of college football, and this arguably will be one of the biggest weeks of the season. To help us make sense of all of it, welcome back, friend of the show, Chris Vannini, senior writer, covers college football for The Athletic, joining us from Dallas, Texas. Thank you for joining us this evening, my man.
Yeah, good to be here, man. College football's up and running.
Yeah, since you're in Texas, we got to start there, right? University of Texas, hook 'em horns, Roll Tide taking on Bama. This will be an SEC matchup for seasons to come, but this season, this is arguably the biggest game of the weekend. How do you see this shaking out? We saw what happened last year when these two franchises met.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago, Alabama escaped by the skin of its teeth, basically. Texas was rolling early. Quinn Ewers gets hurt, and Bryce Young basically carries that team to a late victory in Austin. Now they're in Tuscaloosa. Bryce Young is gone. Most of Texas is back. Alabama's about a 7-point favorite. It's a bit higher than I would have expected, but these are two of the biggest brands in college football with a real, let's see what you got. We got questions about both these teams, high expectations for both teams. This is the game where we figure out how good they really are.
You talked about a lot of Texas talent returning this season. One player not there, though, Bijan Robinson, 8th overall pick by the Atlanta Falcons. Do the Longhorns have a running game? Or are they still trying to figure out who their premier back is, given what they just lost from a season ago?
They've got Brooks and Baxter in the backfield to go with a lot of really good offensive skill talent. Probably the best receiving core in the country as well, with Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, and Whittington, and an offensive line that looks much improved. They got off to a bit of a slow start against Rice, maybe didn't run the ball as well as you want, but I think across the board, Texas feels pretty good about what they've got. They've made some good evaluations. They've added some really good running back recruits, and they lost two really good running backs off of last year's team, but I think they feel pretty good now with what they've got.
And we know both these programs, they play for championships. They don't play for just week-to-week wins. How big will this weekend be come end of December, end of November?
Well, the thing about the playoff era is you can lose a game and still get in. We've seen it, but if you have a win like this, you can afford a loss somewhere else. The Big 12 might be the deepest conference in the sport. The SEC is probably the most difficult in terms of the talent at the top. It's interesting, LSU coming off, LSU looking like they did in week one against Florida State, maybe opens the door a bit more for Bama than we thought coming in. Texas, who knows? They haven't won the Big 12 in quite a while. Texas comes in with a lot of hype. We'll see if Oklahoma is as good as they think. So the future schedules for these teams this year look a little bit different after 1 week than we thought. But you get a win like this, that can propel you forward. It gives you momentum, and you can afford to drop a game possibly and still make the college football playoff.
All right, so I got to ask you about the big story from week one in college football. It's prime, right? It's do you believe? Chris, do you believe after what we saw from Colorado at TCU last weekend? They went down to Texas, got the win, and now they transition to take on a down Nebraska team. Do you believe in these Buffaloes now?
Look, I have to admit, I was completely wrong about Deion Sanders in Colorado in week one. I thought TCU was going to roll them pretty easily. What was most impressive about Colorado to me was not Shedeur Sanders, was not Travis Hunter. It was the organization of that team. Mm-hmm. I think they had one procedural penalty. They dictated the tempo. They got guys in open field. They made big plays. They did exactly what they wanted to do against a team that was runner-up in the national championship game last year, a coach in his second year. So I thought Colorado just organizationally looked very, very impressive. This is a group of kids who had never played together before. I think 4 of their starting offensive linemen joined after spring ball. And so it was kind of hard for TCU to know what to expect looking on the tape. There wasn't tape of these guys playing together. Nebraska will have that benefit. They will have something to go off of and react to. But Colorado, week one, immensely impressive, a lot better than I would have expected.
All right, so you brought up Nebraska, their opponent coming up tomorrow, and we know the history when they were both in the Big 12. Obviously, Nebraska now in the Big 10. They're 0-1 on the season, but it's a new year under head coach Matt Rhule. What will progress look like for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and what kind of progress do you expect to see from week one to week two?
Well, in the summer, Nebraska was about an 8.5 point favorite in this game, and now Colorado's a 3 point favorite. So that goes to show you how quickly the perceptions of these teams change. If you're Nebraska, you're going to want to run the ball. Colorado wore down on the defensive line. TCU was able to run the ball. So I expect Nebraska to pound the rock with running backs, with Jeff Sims at quarterback, who needs to take better care of the ball. Struggled at that in Minnesota. Nebraska they get into close games and they can't finish them. It happened under Scott Frost. It happened in one game under Matt Rule. Now they're going to be on the road in a very difficult environment. There will be a lot of Nebraska fans there, but it's a sold-out game. It's going to be a very, very fun scene. Nebraska needs to run the ball. They need to slow it down because Colorado's going to go fast. Colorado's going to get big plays. So Nebraska needs to shorten that game.
Another big game this weekend, just looking at top 25. We have Ole Miss, Tulane. Tulane, usually the Green Wave not really ranked this early in the season. We see them back into a ranking later in the year. Meanwhile, Ole Miss, we understand the expectations for Lane Kiffin down there in Oxford. What do you make of this matchup?
Keep an eye on the name Michael Pratt, the Tulane quarterback, who not a lot of people know about yet, but is really, really rising, I think, in NFL draft circles. Tulane last year, remember, they beat Kansas State, who went on to win the Big 12, and they beat USC in the Cotton Bowl. And they lost some star players. They lost Tajay Spears, the running back. But Tulane looked really good in week one. They played a pretty good South Alabama team, beat them 37-17. Michael Pratt completed 14 of 15 passes for almost 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, deep passes. This game is at Tulane. It's sold out. It's going to be, again, a very fun atmosphere down there. And Tulane is a program that has been on the rise the last couple of years. They go from 2 wins to 12 wins last year. And now Michael Pratt, a star quarterback who turned down the transfer portal. There were big schools who wanted him. He stayed at Tulane. And now Tulane's looking to beat yet another Power 5 team.
It should be a lot of fun. Tulane, look, if you ever go to a college game for Tulane, I know it's the Bayou, but they know how to have a good time down there, even though it's not the Saints. They know how to have a good time with Tulane down in New Orleans. 2 more questions. I do want to ask you about Oregon, Texas Tech, heading out West Texas. Oregon, once again, the bell cow amongst them for the Pac-12. While Texas Tech, we saw what happened with the Big 12 commissioner. He's expecting big things from the Red Raiders, obviously against a Pac-12 team, but also against Texas as they depart the conference. What can we expect from the Ducks and the Red Raiders?
Yeah, this game lost a little bit of shine when Texas Tech blew a 17-0 lead to Wyoming up in Laramie. But this is still a really good team. Tyler Shuck, the quarterback, very talented. Across the board, this team's got depth. Oregon put up more than 80 points in week 1 against Portland State. It's an FCS team. You'd expect Oregon to do that. But Bo Nix, Heisman candidate, we know Oregon's going to put up points. That's what they can do here. This will be an interesting matchup. On the road in Lubbock, very tough place to play. Gets windy down there. I love this matchup. I love this Texas Tech Oregon matchup. Pac-12, Big 12, after all the fighting that they went through, I'm sure the Pac-12 would love to get one of these over on the Big 12. That's going to be a very, very fun environment. And Bo Nix, there's big billboards of him up in Dallas and stuff like that for Heisman campaigns. This is the first game where he needs to make a statement, and Oregon needs to be what people think they will be.
It's so interesting, right? Because like the Pac-12, we understand this will be the final year of the conference, but the Pac-12 was undefeated last week. So for a maligned football conference, they had a hell of a start with week 1. I know I had you on the show a couple of weeks ago, and this is a question we didn't have time then, but I want to ask you, how should we appreciate, celebrate, commemorate the Pac-12 in this final season for, although the warts the conference has had, they've had a history of great football, and some of these bigger powerhouses are looking to end their Pac-12 run with a championship.
Look, I said coming into the year that the Pac-12 is going to be the most exciting conference in college football this year. And a lot of SEC fans got mad at me for saying that. But I think through week 1 and week 0, we can see that. The Pac-12 is 13-0. I think they're 8-1 against the spread. USC's putting up a ton of points. Oregon's putting up a ton of points. Washington just put up 56 on Boise State. You have a lot of really good quarterbacks in this conference. And most of these big games that all these top 20 teams will play each other, most of them are in October and November. So you're going to have some inflated records, some massive games in the second half of the season within the Pac-12. And if Oregon State, which looked really good against San Jose State, if they get off to a really good start and they're in contention for the conference, you're going to have America rallying around the Beavers because of what is going on in the Pac-12. And them and Washington State being left behind. So I would keep an eye on Oregon State. I'd keep an eye on everybody. You may not get Pac-12 Network. Anytime you can stay up late to watch a Pac-12 game, you're probably going to be watching a really good football team this year. So it's unfortunate this is the last year of the Pac-12 as we know it, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and we can also enjoy it as well.
Hey, look, man, college football is back in full force. Chris, thank you so much for joining us tonight, my man.
Thanks for having me.
Still to come, Baker Machado will join me once again. Don't go anywhere. You're watching The Backup Plan.